If you struggle with sin, then please keep watching this video because we can learn a lot from King David in Psalm 51. So Psalm 51 is David's response to God after his affair with Bathsheba. So he went and he slept with Bathsheba and was married to Uriah. Then he took Uriah and put him on the front lines of the war after he got her pregnant and had him killed in the front lines of war. So this is David's response to God regarding that situation. If you're not familiar with the whole situation, please go research it. It's really fascinating. But you notice that David's posture in this psalm is not focused on the sin, but focused on God. Right? This is something that's really helped me with my faith journey and my walk with God. Is that recognizing that when we sin, our focal point shouldn't be on beating the sin. It should simply just be on loving God, and God will help you beat the sin. Because the enemy will do everything he possibly can to keep your eyes off of God. Right? If he can keep your eyes on the sin, focusing on beating the sin, remember, because your eyes are still on the sin in that case, then he can keep you away from God. Because we oftentimes look at the sin directly and try to fight it on our own, but we recognize that this is simply just a symptom of the problem. It talks about in Ephesians 6 that we do not fight against flesh and blood, but there's a more spiritual realm, a more spiritual fight around us. So the enemy will try to make you think you're fighting the flesh and not look at God, not look at the spiritual aspect, and simply just focus on the humanity of it, where instead of bringing God into the situation. So we notice this in Psalm 51. For instance, in verse 5, it says, "But I was brought forth in iniquity, and in the sin of my mother conceived me." Okay, he's recognizing his sin. He's bringing his sin to attention. But immediately in verse 6, he brings attention to God. He says, "Behold, you delight in truth in the inward being. You teach me wisdom in the secret heart." So David is very often in this psalm bringing God into the situation, making his focal point God, not just his sin. You can't go more than 2 verses in this entire psalm without God being mentioned by David. So it's very important, guys, when we're struggling with sin, to recognize that simply just loving God more will help us fight that battle. Right? John 14:15. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. This is a command from Jesus. This is an invitation from Jesus that requires a response. So if you're struggling with sin, guys, and we all are, just focus more on loving God and not as much on simply just beating the sin. Because if you're focused on beating the sin, you're still focusing on the sin. Just focus on your relationship with God and allow God to fight that battle through you out of your love for Him. So God bless y'all.